everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the astrology for the week of September 25th, and what we have titled, If You Dream It, You Can Do It. The purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about today are Mercury and Venus making a T-square with Saturn and Neptune. We're deeming this finding magical solutions. We'll also talk about a biggie, which is Jupiter in Libra opposite Uranus in Aries. This is called quantum leaps. And then lastly, we'll talk about Mars trine Pluto, which is stationing direct, and this is all about power struggles. So we have a very dynamic week, and as always, we encourage you to remember that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what's actually happening in your life right now and where there is some potential. So always notice what resonates with you most and use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So let's kick off this week's episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects for all you astro geeks out there. So our lunar lady is going to kick off the week waxing her way into the ready for adventure sign of Sagittarius, where she will remain until Wednesday, the 27th, when she moves into Capricorn. And we have that first quarter moon, which we're going to talk about later in the episode. She then goes about her way and moves into the sociable air sign of Aquarius late Friday for us on the Pacific time, which is Saturday the 30th for the rest of the world. And then she's going to stay there in this area realm until we close out the week. And so also of note, we have Mercury, who will be changing from Virgo to Libra on Friday, September 29th at 5:42 p.m. Pacific time, which is September 30th at 12:42 a.m. Universal Time and 10:42 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And we'll talk more about that in the first segment as well.
Yeah, so we're excited to jump into these transits with you. And one last note before we do is if you want to get the show notes, which is like a little cheat sheet of all of the days and times with quotes and the tarot cards that we use, you can get that by becoming a patron of the show at the $5 per month tier. So it's really helpful to have as a reference throughout the week. You can find more about that on our Facebook or Instagram page under Feminine Principle Podcast, or you can find that on feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also something new and fun that we're doing is we'll be hosting a Facebook Live event to share more about us and how we got into astrology. So this we have scheduled for Thursday, October 5th. And so it's not this week, it's the following week. It will be at 9 a.m. Pacific time, which is 4 p.m. Universal Time. And then in Australia, sorry guys, it's Friday, October 6th. It's at 2 a.m. Australian Eastern Time. So our Aussies, maybe if you're up late, you'll catch us. So we're really excited to do that. It'll be in celebration of our 20th episode.
Yes. Can you believe it's been 20 episodes, Shawna?
No.
Or about to be next week. So yeah, we're going live, folks. So if you want to come and hang out with us and just check us out and, interact, and, we're going to have we will be basically interviewing each other so that you can know more about us. But then we're going to open it up for a live Q&A at the end. So we'd love to see all you out there and show some support, and we can do a little back and forth, which is always fun. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Shawna, let's get started with our first transit here. Well, it's actually a several transits kind of matched into one. And that is that Mercury and Venus, which is in a loose T-square with Saturn and Neptune. And it's actually two transits here. We're going to talk about Mercury squaring Saturn, which is going to happen exactly on Monday, September 25th at 7:36 a.m. Pacific time, which is 2:36 p.m. Universal Time, and Tuesday, the 26th at 12:35 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that's going to happen at 21 degrees Virgo and Sagittarius. And then next we will have Venus, who's going to oppose Neptune on Friday, September 29th at 5:12 p.m. Pacific Time, which is Saturday, the 30th at 12:12 a.m. Universal Time and 10:12 a.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that Venus opposite Neptune is going to happen at 12 degrees Virgo and Pisces. And we are calling this transit Finding Magical Solutions. So Shawna, kick us in with your quotes.
So I have two quotes because this is a multi-layered transit. These are both by Carl Jung, the amazing psychotherapist and the founder of depth psychology. So he says, "Be simple and always take the next step. You needn't see it in advance, but you can look back afterwards. There is no how of life. One just does it." And then the other layer of this is, "All art intuitively apprehends coming changes in the collective unconscious." And so I like these layered together because the first one really speaks to Mercury squaring Saturn, and then the second one speaks to Venus opposing Neptune. And this is, it's a loose aspect, but it's still really important because we still have this blend of energies where Mercury and Saturn are coming together to get us to move forward in a very diligent manner and to be conscientious of things, to be reflective, but to also go forward. And then the Venus opposite Neptune, this is a time where we are connected to the collective unconscious. And Carl Jung speaks so much about how we have the capacity to have premonitions via dreams or through our creative work. And that when we're tapping into our unconscious, we're actually tapping into the collective at times. And with this transit, it's really beneficial to balance out a little bit of both so that we're tapping in to our intuitive and maybe even the collective. But at the same time, we're still taking the next step, because when we tap into all of this intuitive and Neptunian and creative kind of energy, it can feel really uncertain. And so it is important that we take one step at a time to find these magical solutions.
Yes, because they're out there. They just have to, a lot of times it's so interesting, especially with Mercury squaring Saturn, because it is a square. It challenges us in some way to maybe, think about things differently, and especially the structure around what we've been building. The past couple of weeks we've had a little, there's been a little looseness in the structure with all these Neptune transits. Venus is the last one in this chain, basically making these oppositions to Neptune. So there's been a lot of kind of haze in the air as far as, what is real and concrete that we're building upon. And that's kind of what we're talking about, Shawna, right? With that, we're tying this into the fact that it is kind of forming a loose T-square, the two, aspects together with Saturn and Neptune, which Saturn and Neptune have been, in this square energy, even though it's now moving, it's been moving away because the last exact, square was in September of last year. So, but still there is that kind of taking that kind of ethereal quality and this dreaminess, that we have, and then formulating that into, this big picture reality. And so I love all this Virgo energy that is kind of tapping into this square, where there might not have been rigid form around in a while, actually, because these are issues that we've been going through for a while. And so I feel like the fact that we're getting all these kind of challenging aspects from Virgo, which asks us to get real about everything. It's helping really tap into to look at the specifics and look at those details, because that Mercury square Saturn kind of wants us to look at things a little bit differently. It's challenging us to approach it, in a different manner. And that's why we stop and we take a minute, to assess these things. So Shawna, how do you see this, this Saturn square Neptune energy kind of coming into play with these two aspects?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I love that the square is coming from Virgo, like you say, Mel. So it is more practical. It's more like, let's get down to business. Because we essentially have a cluster of personal planets, Mercury and Venus, and then Mars is in there too, that are activating this square of Saturn and Neptune that happened 2015, and then it wrapped up around the end of 2016. And so Saturn and Neptune together are essentially like, okay, I have a dream, Neptune, I have an ideal, I have this vision, this thing that would be amazing, or maybe I don't even know what it is, but I just want something that's better, that is more beautiful and magical. And then when that meets with Saturn, it's like, okay, how am I actually going to do that? And that can be really challenging. So I would watch for this week where I think that the Virgo energy coming in through Mercury and Venus, it lets us, it may like remind us of things that we were trying to work through as far as finding a balance between ideal and ambition in 2015 and 2016. And I think that Mercury square Saturn in particular requires effort of us. It requires that we engage with the work that is necessary to get the things done. And then Venus Neptune is like, but I want it to be beautiful and amazing. And so, I see this, it really is like this teeter-totter of like moving back and forth between like putting in the work to get what it is that is your ideal.
And that makes a lot of sense, Shawna, because what's interesting is, with these cycles, cause think about it, if we tap into that Saturn, Neptune cycle, this is the closing square of that. And even though we're in, like we said, this was exact, last year, there's still that energy there. And so you can always look to the beginning of the cycle when it had its conjunction to kind of look at where, the energy lies as far as the whole cycle is concerned. And it's so interesting about this, this whole Saturn Neptune, cycle. Its conjunction was actually in Capricorn in 89. The same year the Berlin Wall came down, exactly when it was conjunct, actually. The same year we had, dial-up internet started, which is crazy to think about as we talk on this podcast. And so there was a dissolving of boundaries there, if you think about it, like that was like the start of, all this. But I think the symbolism of it being in Capricorn is, exactly what you're just saying, Shawna, about, that ambition. And I think that, and tapping into that ambition to make things a reality in this world that not only you can see, but others can as well. And so that's really tapping into these dreams once again. And I think that might be, even though Neptune and Pisces go so well together, I think because this cycle started in its conjunction in Capricorn, so many years ago, the cycle itself is really rooted in Capricorn and is strong in its dignity there. So we're back to this ambition. We're back to this. How can we build this bigger picture that I can share with other people and stay true to manifesting, the reality of the dream. And so I think we are getting challenged this week upon that because, Mercury squaring Saturn is essentially asking us, take a moment. Let's pause. Let's think about it. Are you missing a detail? Cause we're looking at this big picture and these Virgo planets like, okay, I got to figure this out. Like it's all these ducks have to be in a row. And sometimes you need to take a second to do that. Or you might have to look at it differently in order to. And then that Venus opposition to Neptune, we're seeking out inspiration, we're really impressionable right now. And so, let's use that for good, because you can be impressionable in basically, gain the impressions you need to go forward, that intuition perhaps. But then you can be impressionable to where you might fall into something that it's really not that grounded in reality. And I think that's where that Mercury Saturn square comes in. That's like pulls it back. Like, let's think about the reality here. So I know that was a lot, Shawna. So pick up where you feel best to enter in that.
Yeah, no, and it's a lot to talk about. So to focus for a moment on the Venus opposite Neptune, I've noticed with people that have this aspect natally in their birth chart, there is this tendency to get into relationships where it's more in the mind even sometimes, and maybe it's not even like a real physical relationship, but it's like this romanticized ideal. And these people, they can get caught up in the fantasy of a relationship with a person or with a certain kind of type. And so I think that is something to watch out for, because with Venus opposite Neptune, we are super impressionable and we can get swept away in the waves of fantasy and romance. And so I think it's like there's different ways to use this. I would say totally let yourself get swept away in what is inspiring, but then keep your actions, your feet on the ground and be like, okay, is this, is it good for me to let myself, to what capacity can I turn myself over to my inspiration, and that kind of thing. Like, where is it helpful? And then where is it too much? And I think that really depends on a person's temperament and how grounded they are in their everyday life. So yeah, that's something that I would be watchful for with the Venus and Neptune.
Yeah. I'm just thankful it's on a weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cause, that's the thing is it can be, it can actually be just a good time to chill, to be honest. Like you might want to relax with friends. You might want to, just kind of find activities that might allow you just to be a little creative, dive into that. Like this would be an excellent weekend to do a vision board. Or, especially now that Mercury squared Saturn and you've collected your thoughts, you might be thinking about things a little differently, and then you can take that creative juice and try to, do a little manifestation work, in a sense. I wouldn't go out shopping because chances are you might come home with a bunch of, pocketbook way lighter than you left. And you'd be like, what is all this stuff?
Don't make any commitments that are long term, ideally.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the truth. That's the truth. It can be a little confusing right now around, certain relationships or your finances and spending and what is really of value and what's not. So, just know, that being said, that people around you might be a little confusing right now. You might even get information at the time of Mercury squaring Saturn that has you like, what? Wait, what? Cause Mercury essentially is a messenger and it is, communicating things to us. So the combination of these two might bring something into light that you have to think about that you might actually be a little confused about, and you have to kind of get your mind wrapped around that a little bit. So yeah. So yeah, let's talk about some tarot cards associated with this transit. And they're very interesting. The tarot this whole week was, very interesting and,
yes.
And cryptic, but not. What I drew for these two aspects combined, I got the Seven of Pentacles as the focus and the Magician as the grounding. We've all been trying to manifest certain things, as of late, and especially over the last how many, months, ever since basically late May. And in those manifestations, we might have done a lot of work. And I think that the Seven of Pentacles is really asking us to take a moment, and step back and look at that progress and really, evaluate it. It's almost a spiritual test within the progress. Because this is a time when we look at what we've done and we may begin to doubt the progress, is it worth it? Is this, is what I'm manifesting and putting my energy and my talents to, is this a crop that can really, be fruitful. And so these are kind of basically what I'm getting out of this is that we need to just not be so doubtful, see it for what it is, know that we reap what we sow, and just stay the course, but maybe evaluate it a little differently. So Shawna, how do you see these two cards playing together?
Yeah, I like what you say there, Mel, because it really ties back into how Mercury squaring Saturn, this is the closing square. So it's essentially the last quarter square of the Mercury-Saturn cycle, which is a time of assessing our progress. And it's, the term sometimes that's used with the last quarter square is a crisis of consciousness, where you're like, oh my gosh, I've made this progress. I've done all of these things. Is this what I want? Is it worthwhile? What am I going to do with what I've built? Like, what do I want to do, and what serves the highest purpose? And that to me is the message from the Seven of Pentacles. It is like this pause where we get to look at everything that we've done and decide what needs to be kept, and then what can start to dissolve away. And then the Magician card is really beautiful for empowerment and saying, okay, I am the magician. I have this power to create. And I like what you said, Mel, about staying the course. Like, even if we decide to shift things a little bit, even if there is a need for revisioning or shifting the vision or tweaking it, we still must continue. And we have the capability, we have the power to continue with that Magician card to create whatever it is that we want.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and that's the thing, this might be the trick right now, and especially with all these Neptune transits we've been having, as you, and the Magician itself, you may want to act right now or feel that you need to, but really now is a time of contemplation and just taking stock of what has been done. And a lot of times when we do that and we have that pausing point, there can be doubt that creeps in, especially with Neptune transits, where, things aren't as concrete, as we like. And especially with Mercury squaring Saturn, that can create doubt as well, because, what was so sure in our mind just got, questioned by the universe in a sense. But that's okay. We're supposed to question things. We're supposed to understand things, a little differently. And it allows us, this pausing point basically allows us to then carry on, from a stronger vantage point, because we've kind of reassessed everything that we have put our energy into, over this time period. So, I think they're great cards. I think they really exemplify, all this Virgo energy. And I feel like a lot of these cards are really speaking to the earth signs, this week, which you'll hear the other ones when we get there. But it's really tapping into all that Virgo energy and that, Capricorn energy and those, Pluto stuff. So,
Pluto stuffs.
stuffs. So, don't just keep going. There's still more to offer. We're only at the 7. That's the thing, is that when all 7s are a spiritual test, that's when we're basically have to muster the courage within ourselves to carry on beyond this hump, is in a sense. So just know it's a spiritual test around your own manifestation ability. And you just gotta keep going, and don't rest on those laurels too long. Believe in the goal, believe in the plan. And carry on, essentially. And hopefully with some new inspiration with this Venus opposite Neptune. Hopefully there'll be, not only a different way to looking at it, but inspired in a different way. Yeah, cause even, we didn't really talk about the moon's path through all this, because it's interesting how we start off the week with the square to Saturn, that Mercury square. And then we have the moon in Sag, which is basically, is going to conjunct Saturn and square that Neptune and Mercury energy. And then it's going to move on to, Capricorn, where it's going to conjunct Pluto, or, right before we have that, the Neptune Venus opposition. So the moon is kind of triggering a lot of very significant things these weeks by just these conjunctions to these bigger planets, I think. And that's just a little added tidbit to throw in there at the end. But yeah, I think it's very significant to how we are going to deal with these, transits.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And you're right, Mel, we're in the waxing phase as well. So it is this time of growth and moving forward. And, it does feel important how the moon is touching these points at this time, these sensitive points.
Yeah. And they are sensitive. Feel them. You feel them when they touch.
Yep.
So just know that these are going to be essentially, opportunity periods in a sense to really get in touch with that Saturn energy, get in touch with that Pluto energy, which we'll talk about a little later in the show because we do have Pluto energy coming along the line. Just to know. And just quick note, the fact, that, Mercury is actually moving into Libra, that the same hour that, Venus opposes Neptune. So our thinking faculty and our minds are kind of going to be a little, I like to use what, Christopher Witecki says. He says offline. Whenever we're at 0 degrees and we're like moving into a different energy, that kind of energy goes offline for a second and we're moving into a new space. So just know, to add a little nebulousness to this whole transit, Mercury is going to be in a funky in-between zone too. So Saturday just, especially with the moon in late degrees of Capricorn, might just want to, you might just want to take a second, and go and just enjoy some time because there's some things that I wouldn't say working against us, but can make, clarity a little bit harder. So.
Yeah, I think that's wise advice. It seems like earlier in the week is more of a time of diligence and being practical and getting things done. And then the weekend is like, okay, we can chill and relax and let the creativity and the inspiration and the pleasure principle take over.
Yes. So, all right. Well, that being said, let us talk about some questions to ask yourself. So what I would ask myself, with aspects of life being a little unclear right now, how can I stay motivated despite limitation and uncertainty? I would ask, when considering my dreams, how much progress have I made towards that vision? How can I relax and keep the faith without disillusion taking hold? And then lastly, I would ask, have I turned these mental challenges around enough to see the many sides of the issue? How can I be on the lookout for magical solutions? And so that's what I'd ask myself during this week, for all this, this is a combination of energy, so it's not pinpointed one direct way. It's just a hovering of energy throughout the week. So that's being said, let's move on, Shawna, to a big kicker here. It's something that's been brewing for weeks now. And that is Jupiter in Libra, who is going to oppose Uranus in Aries in what we are titling Quantum Leaps. And so that's going to be exact on Wednesday, September 27th at 9:24 p.m. Pacific time, which is Thursday, the 28th at 4:24 a.m. Universal time, and then 2:24 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that opposition is going to happen at 27 degrees Libra and Aries. And also of note, we actually have the first quarter moon in Capricorn that is right before this opposition, and that is going to be exact on Wednesday, the 27th at 7:53 p.m. Pacific time, which is the Thursday, the 28th at 2:53 a.m. Universal time and 12:53 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And so Shawna, kick us in with your quote for this massive transit.
Yes, it's a big one. All right. So this quote is also by Carl Jung. I don't know if I said that in the beginning. All the quotes this week are Carl Jung. So he says, the upheaval of our world and the upheaval in consciousness is one and the same. everything becomes relative and therefore doubtful. And while man, hesitant and questioning, contemplates, his spirit yearns for an answer that will ally the turmoil of doubt and uncertainty. And so I love this quote because Jupiter and Uranus, they do bring a certain level of upheaval. They bring this like massive awakening where it's like, oh my gosh, this new surprise or this new insight or this revelation is coming up and it cannot be contained. And because these are transpersonal planets, they're outer planets, they typically relate to the collective in some way. And that doesn't mean that there isn't something that we connect to in our personal lives, but there's, I really like this quote because it speaks to the mirroring of, internal psyche, of internal consciousness, and then what it is that, the climate, the social climate that we're in, essentially. So I'm really excited to see, how everyone's feeling, but it definitely feels like there is some type of upheaval that may be possible.
And, that's so right, Shawna, because, what we were saying just earlier about, okay, so this is exact on Wednesday the 27th. That doesn't mean it's just happening on Wednesday the 27th. This has been brewing for weeks now. And what you were just saying, Shawna, we've all been essentially increasingly triggered for these changes and this upheaval in our life. I mean, because, ever since the solar eclipse, there's kind of been chaos in the world on so many different levels, and in people's lives. Like, so many people have gone through some massive changes since that solar eclipse. And we can attribute it to the eclipse, yeah. But it's also this Jupiter opposition Uranus that has been inching its way to this opposition that has been pushing us with that, it's like a dramatic need to change our lives, or because it's an opposition, it's coming from without, it's coming on the outside of us. And so a lot of us are actually being triggered by these outside events or these outside relationships to change in some way. So this is not a light thing. These are major, major cycles in our personal life, but mostly in the life of the planet. And so, like, if we were to go back and talk about, like we were saying in the last segment, that Saturn Neptune cycle. Well, Jupiter and Uranus, its synodic cycle, it conjuncted in June of 2010 at 0 degrees Aries. The start of the zodiac. So if you think about, like, it is. And, you can see our political climate right now and a lot of change that's going on in the world. And it's tied into basically the starting point of this degree. And why tensions are probably so heated, right now is because essentially it's triggering back to that cycle of 0 degrees Aries, which is a very, very potent point. Probably the most potent point in the zodiac, or at least on our Western system. And so, what I would suggest to, maybe if you want to kind of gain a little insight to what this cycle might look like for you, keep in mind June 2010, let's look back there. I would look to where Aries is in your chart, 0 degrees Aries, to tie into, kind of like that theme of where you've been building in this time. The square was in April of 2014, in Cancer at 13 degrees Cancer in Aries. And so we've been building on this 0 degrees Aries theme, since 2010. So Shawna, what do you think about all that?
Yeah. So I think it's important to look at the cycles, and I think that, we can see the subtle themes, and regardless of what was happening at the beginning or at the first quarter square, it's definitely this time where the top is being blown off of whatever has been built that isn't working. Because Uranus is like, hey, Uranus wants to liberate us from where it is that we've been bound in some way. And so the beginning of the cycle, June 2010, I'm curious if there are ways in which we became unavoidably aware that we were bound in some way. And I know for me that definitely happens. But you know, it's subtle. Like around that time, there was a certain binding for my living situation and my work situation. And at that time, it was more of a feeling than something literally happening. And then now I'm kind of like at the apex of that situation. And so the literal events don't always tie, but that doesn't mean that something cannot radically shift now at this time.
Well, I think that's kind of what this is actually calling for. This time is calling for us to have radical shifts in a way. I mean, in the right way. It doesn't drop everything and go like, I'm going to Bali now, or, you know, whatever. But it is the whole point of the tension is that we have to change. We have become so rooted in certain ways, and especially in the last 7 years of this cycle. And now we are basically being challenged, on the opposite side of things to make some decisions there. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, you make a good point, Mel. It is important whenever Uranus is around to avoid throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because that can be a tendency, because we're so excited to like reinvent and scrap everything and start new. And sometimes that is necessary. Sometimes that's a little bit overzealous. I think that's a particular possibility for going overzealous when we have Jupiter in the mix, because Jupiter is like, yes, all of everything. I want the entire buffet, like go big or go home. That's Jupiter style. So depending on one's temperament, you know, we want to watch for like, okay, are we being, you know, are we still using the diplomacy of Jupiter and like tempering things and that kind of thing as we're making these changes.
Yeah, because, and you know, and I don't think a whole lot of us are going to go overboard, although there's definitely people out there. If you're strong in Aries and everything's kind of like hanging out with Uranus, chances are you're going to be on that end of things. But most of us are actually kind of going to be caught up in like a tug of war between, you know, that strong, urge to basically change our lives versus, you know, being where we are. Like it's that thought of, you know, breaking new ground versus the security of what is right now. And so I think that that's kind of where the opposition lies, is like, how can we, you know, because Uranus in Aries is asking us to stand tall, asking us to be courageous about certain things, you know, asking us to break free, in that kind of like warrior type of way. But we might be stuck in these old patterns. We might be stuck in indecision with this Jupiter in Libra. We might be stuck in, certain relationships we might not need to be in anymore, that we need to free ourselves with. And that doesn't mean just romantic. It could be anything. But these are the types of things where we're basically going back and forth between making those changes and taking our life to the next level and kind of being, in the place that we're still at and not making those quantum leaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes these quantum leaps, they can be rooted in inspiration and insight and creative work versus making a practical change in one's life. I was reading recently, Richard Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche. And he talks about different cycles, and he has one chapter that's devoted to the Jupiter-Uranus cycle. And it's really interesting how a lot of technology and artistic work has been tied back to the cycles within Jupiter and Uranus, where there's like this inspiration that comes through. And so you know, that's a possibility too, is maybe it's something that is more quiet, so to speak, but it feels like this intense inspiration. And so it's a great time to make space for that, to channel those kinds of things and to honor what it is that feels important, honor what, inspiration it is that we're receiving.
That is so interesting, Shawna. I mean, not only because we have that Venus opposite Neptune and we were talking about, you know, tapping into those. But like we were saying earlier, this has been going on for, a handful of weeks now. And to be honest, I have been so inspired in the last, I know, granted, we've had Neptune transits, but I have been so inspired musically in the last couple weeks and have made a lot of strides, in that realm and creating new things. So what you were just saying really resonates with me as far as that theory. I totally get that and I totally feel that.
Well, I love that. And what was really interesting with what he was saying was that sometimes he was pointing out particular, a piece that Beethoven wrote or something where it was written when there was this cycle, when it was exact, but no one knew about it, it wasn't until later that it became popular. And so it's there could be things that are coming through you right now that are really pivotal and important. And you may not even know until, years later, how much of an impact they'll have.
Yeah, that's very true. Cause, we do have Jupiter in Libra, which is, definitely on the art side of things and beauty in life. And, so that makes total sense to how these inspirations, especially, as far as, aesthetic and these art, yearnings can really come up at this time and then get in there, cause when you have those creative, those creative moments where you sit down, no matter what you do, if you're painting, you're playing music, you're journaling, writing, creative writing, whatever, it brings you that much closer to yourself. So here we are, we're getting really close to ourselves this week. There's a lot of things that are challenging us, to learn about ourselves a little bit more. And I think what you were saying, Shawna, is that maybe if we do, kind of tap into this root of creativity and inspiration that's happening, during these transits, we're just going to get that much closer to ourselves and open ourselves up enough to, gain some new insight and make this beautiful creation essentially to commemorate our own, spiritual, progress, in a sense. So.
Yeah. I love that.
There are good things that can come out of these transits. But let's talk about that first quarter moon in Capricorn.
Yes.
That is there too. And, just to refresh everybody's memory, that is going to happen, the same day, like an hour and a half before the exact Jupiter opposition to Uranus. And so, it's so interesting that we have our first quarter square, and it's going to be at 5 degrees Capricorn. So we're basically going to have that square, and then the moon is going to continue on to how many hours later to conjunct Pluto. That kind of puts things into the mix. So politically, I'm very interested, because the first quarter square is all about action, and taking action in a sense. And here we have this Capricorn energy, and I'm not going to say worried, but I'm very intrigued as to what our world is going to be looking like, during this time. Because politically, Jupiter's cycle with Uranus, and especially that opposition, ties into a lot of, change as far as, the worldview and politics are concerned. And of course, we don't talk about these types of things. It's not our focus, but I just want everybody to know that this is the type of astrology that can create events, around those types of things. So Shawna, how do you think, this first quarter moon, what are your insights about this?
Yeah. So I'm also curious to see what's going on. I think that it is a time of possible breakthroughs because it is the first quarter. So it's okay, there's a challenge or there's something that we're pushing against. And again, that's, maybe internally inside of ourselves, or maybe that is somewhere out in the world. I think it's so hard to speculate with these kinds of things on what's going to happen because we were talking about earlier, sometimes there's something pivotal that happens that's a beginning and we don't even know about it until years later, how much of an impact that act or that certain thing will have. And so I think Yeah, I think the first quarter moon with this aspect, it is this time of like where we're maybe needing to break through a certain challenge or a certain restraint in a way in order to get that freedom, in order to get that quantum leap going. And yeah, that may involve some Pluto stuff too. It may involve working with our personal power or judging how it is that we feel we may be restrained or manipulated, or giving our power to someone that doesn't need to have our power and that kind of thing. So all that stuff may potentially come up within the mix at an emotional level.
Yeah, because it's, this aspect, Jupiter opposition to Uranus, is essentially, like we were saying, it's not just this day. It's, how many weeks. But this whole week is going to be painted around this picture. So I think maybe even after that first quarter, because it's so early in the Capricorn, that, the next day, I would say is going to be that, what day will that be? That will be Thursday, the 28th. Might be a little challenging because that is when, basically the moon is going to meet up with Pluto, and then eventually make a T-square with both of these planets. So emotionally, we're going to, kind of be triggered into action at, probably on Thursday or Friday, or probably more Thursday. We're going to be feeling that emotion of like, I have to make strides, cause here we are. Let's bring it back to Jupiter and Uranus. We're trying to change some things. We're trying to break free of certain parts of our routines, and what we've been doing. We're trying to manifest change and growth in our lives. And chances are there's obstacles around that. And that could be from other people, cause we're once again in that opposition. So I think a lot of the tension is actually going to come a little bit after that first quarter moon, when we get into the later degrees of Capricorn.
Mm. Yeah.
So, but we'll just have to wait and see, right? That's just the way it works.
That's the way it works.
That's just the way it works. So, so really, like with this opposition, this is a great time to really think about your life, and see where you want to break free from certain restrictions. And I think that's where that Capricorn energy and that first quarter moon can come in, is because, Saturn and Capricorn, there's rules and limitations around everything, and especially emotional limitations if we're going to go into that moon, because, speaking from a moon in Capricorn, it is in detriment, and it can be a little hard in that respect. So this is a great time to really go within and see what might be holding you back through your own emotions. Because at the end of it, if you're able to break free from all this stuff, you're going to be probably really thankful for that freedom that you're going to get from this. But it's just going to be challenging along the way. So to bring in some cards, into this situation, because, this is a big transit, and we're kind of combining two separate but now infused things together, this opposition in that first quarter moon. So I actually have two card combos to share. And that is, I drew the 8 of Pentacles as the focus and the 9 of Cups as the grounding, and also the Hanged Man as the focus and the Devil as the grounding. And I think that second combo really kind of ties into the first quarter moon. So just to kind of sum that up real quick, 8 of Pentacles is really tapping into that Virgo energy. Cause here we are talking about everything else, but all these planets are in Virgo still, right? And so we're being called upon to essentially, get down to, our hard work, our discipline, mastery. We have these wishes and this emotional fulfillment we want out of life, and that is going to take some hard work. And so I see the Hanged Man and the Devil as, the backup here. And it's really about, any fear or negativity that might be holding you back from that mastery or getting what it is that you want or wish for. It basically needs a change of perspective right now. You're going to have to look at it a little differently so you can free yourself, from this negative influence, or especially if you're feeling stuck in some way. So Shawna, how do you see these two card combinations kind of playing together and how we can work into these, aspects?
Yeah, so this is an interesting combo. what I'm noticing is that there is this focus on the material world. There's this focus on, with the Eight of Pentacles, it's about putting in the effort, putting in the work. The Nine of Cups is about wishes and what it is that we want and getting that, and the possible materialism, for better or worse, that can come along with that. And then with the Devil being the grounding card on the second spread, that's really interesting to me too. So I think with a lot of this, the message that I see is that the material world is really important, and it is important for us to speak up and to say what is right and what is not right, and that we can't just spiritualize away all of the problems in the world. Unfortunately, we can't just wish for it to be better. Sometimes we actually need to take action, because even though we are spiritual beings having a material experience, the material is still really important. And so it's like, okay, how do we it's like the serenity prayer. How do we release the things that we can't control, take action on the things that we can, and then have the wisdom to know the difference?
Yes, because that's so true, and a lot of us might be, especially with that Hangman as the focus, a lot of us might be just feeling a little stuck right now. And so we have to essentially know that we have to look at things a little differently, because I think with so many planets still in Virgo, or, there's still that energy there, and especially to tie back into that Eight of Pentacles, is that, we're being called upon that, like you said, that earthly realm and what we're mastering and, creating on, here in this world, that we can show other people and that we can be, recognized for, essentially. But we also have to learn in order to get all that we wish for. Like, some of us might be stuck in, being able to not work from a place of perfectionism, and learning and knowing that, you need to start honing your craft. And the only way you're going to do that is learning through the work and actually doing the work and just doing it. And know that it's not going to be perfect all the time. And this is kind of where I'm tying in that first quarter moon, where we, are emotionally connecting or challenged by what it is we've created in this world, this earthly thing. Earth signs, especially Virgo and Capricorn, like things just so, and that control aspect of it. But a lot of times you can't actually get that perfect vision that you might be looking for. And that doesn't mean what you're doing isn't going to be this masterpiece in the end. It just means that the vision might be slightly skewed. And so that's why I think that Hangman comes in and is like, okay, let's turn this upside down. What is it? How can we look at this a little differently? Because basically, unless we look at this differently and change our perspective, and sacrifice certain elements of what it is that we're going for, like that perfectionist tendency, we're going to essentially be, stuck in these habitual actions and this kind of devil-like, situation, to where we're held back in our own bondage, based on our inability to look at something a little differently. Because Capricorn essentially is asking that Eight of Pentacles. It's like, okay, get to work, hone that craft, become, use your skills with confidence, and dedicate yourself to granting your wishes. Cause that's the only way it's going to happen is if you put that dedication, that time, that work, that energy into it. Cause essentially, when the Hangman shows up, patience is still needed. And we saw that earlier with the Seven of Pentacles, in our first transit, where we're taking a moment to take stock in things. So this is just another one of those cards where we're kind of reassessing things, I think.
Yeah. And I think too, just to add another piece to it, as far as the social climate, it could be a time where the things that we've seen come up more explosively recently around racism and gender equality and all of those things, those may be inflamed a little bit more with Jupiter and Uranus in general. And so to me, these cards are they're a reminder that we can't just sit on the sidelines. that, you know, we do need to engage, like with that apprenticeship. It's like, okay, what are we doing to, not that we need to be involved in a way that is harmful, but that we can't just sit back and not decide that, you know, there is a need for engagement, and that we can do that in a spiritual way, like the Hanged Man. But that, when we speak up about what is right or what is not right, or what is just and unjust, that's when we can actually release the bondage of the devil. And that's when we can work towards creating equality and equal opportunities and all of these things. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's true, because, you know, here we got that Jupiter in Libra, and Jupiter in Libra has definitely been pushing us to address these social justice issues. Absolutely. So that is definitely on the table for this opposition. So, you know, we will just have to wait and see now, won't we? But we'd love to hear if any of you have Jupiter, Uranus stories, you know, trying to, kind of break new ground and new territory in life. We'd love to hear it. So, give us a shout out, for what Jupiter, and Uranus look like for you. So let's, wrap this segment up with some questions to take away. You know, so I would ask myself, where am I being awakened to make choices for growth in my life? How can I look at the challenges I've encountered, especially involving others, with a new perspective? I would ask, with all these planets still in Virgo, how can I facilitate growth by mastering my own skills to get what I want? How can I break free with my own effort? And then lastly, I would ask, when torn between following the excitement of change versus what is secure and known, how can I break out towards greater freedom without risking it all? How can I make a quantum leap?
I love those.
So, thank you. All right. So we're going to be leaping here. It's time to leap, people. So that being said, I think the next aspect and really ties into this as far as going forward. And so here we are talking about last but certainly not least, we have Mars, who's going to be trining Pluto in Capricorn, and Pluto is also stationing direct. It's been retrograde. So just a couple exacts here. And we are titling this Power Struggles, because Pluto is in the works. So just some exacts here. We have Pluto stationing direct on Thursday, the 28th at 12:33 Pacific time, which is 7:33 p.m. Universal time, and Friday, the 29th at 5:33 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that's going to happen at 16 degrees Capricorn. And then we're going to have that Mars, trine Pluto aspect, which happens Sunday, October 1st at 4:32 p.m. Pacific time, which is 11:32 p.m. Universal time, and Monday the 2nd at 9:32 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that's going to happen at 16 degrees Virgo and Capricorn. So Shawna, kick us in with your quote.
So another Carl Jung special quote. He says, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge." And so I realize that quote may sound a little bit dark and dreary, but come on, we're talking about Pluto. So,
and Mars.
Yeah, Pluto and Mars. And so this is the thing with Pluto, is Pluto requires that we confront our shadow, aka our unconscious. It requires that we confront the parts of ourselves that we feel uncomfortable with. And this can be qualities that we don't like about ourselves. It can also be qualities that are really positive, but that we feel uncomfortable with because they're too amazing. So this aspect is really interesting because there's this fire, this Mars that's like, hey, I want you to awaken whatever it is that's unconscious. I want you to see this. I want you to feel into it. And, so it is it does feel like a very fiery and dynamic and almost maybe like an urgent kind of feeling. I'm curious how you see this happening too, Mel, cause I feel like it may be more of an internal feeling kind of thing than something happening externally, but I don't know. What do you think?
With our station direct, or are we talking about the trine to Pluto, or just in general? What's going on here?
What's really interesting is that when Pluto stations direct, the moon is actually closely conjunct.
I know.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that is kind of huge. And the fact that we've made this, titled this Power Struggles. And we were just talking about all this Jupiter, Uranus opposition stuff and even how that looks like, in the political climate. Like, to be honest, I think when this station's direct, chances are there might be some type of power play announced in the world, by someone. But, that's here and besides the point, but just wanted to get that out there. And I think that because whenever a planet stations either retrograde or direct, it is just so slow. It is just so prominent. And it's really just out there. It's like this beacon that's like glowing, like, look at me. I am slow and magnificent. I am changing direction. So I kind of look at, especially with the Pluto station, just to get some specifics out there for our listeners, Pluto went retrograde on April 19th of this year. So we have been in this backwards motion around these issues, since April. So I think that during the retrograde motion, we've actually spent a lot of time, making inward changes, because Pluto has that transformative quality. It asks honesty of us. It wants us to break down certain things that no longer work and bring up this new earth, this new ground, especially in our goals and ambitions since it's in Capricorn. So I think we've made a lot of inward changes around that in the past, almost 6 months that it's been. And now it's time to take that strategy that we've been working on behind the scenes and get it out there in real life and to execute this. And I think that's where when Mars actually trines Pluto in Virgo, we have 2 earth signs ready to get to work, get to business, a lot of energy, a lot of drive behind that. I think we can start making a lot of these internal transformations, a little more apparent in the real world, or at least that's kind of, how I see it. Like a lot of the breakdowns we might have gone through internally can now break through on the outside and be more apparent. So Shawna, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. It's like maybe all of the processing that we've done from April until now, like working through some of these Pluto kind of themes, which are, shame and feeling guilty or feeling resentful or feeling like someone or something has a certain level of power over us. To me, this is a time where we get to reclaim that power and to say, hey, no, I'm in charge of my life or I have these other options available to me that I didn't realize before and to like essentially reclaim inner authority is really what I see with the station.
Yes. And I think because of that reclaiming of that inner authority, we basically get to put that on the outside of us. It's going to become, it's not even going to be an active thing. It's almost like it's just going to be apparent that we're that much more in control and in charge of our lives because we've made all these internal changes. And so it's just going to organically manifest on the outside of us based on this new inner awareness. And it's not even that new. These are things we've been working on slowly but surely and painfully probably, for the last how many months. And what you said earlier, Shawna, about like working through those certain type of power issues and a certain resentment, and we're working around, those, what other people might have, questioned and brought into our lives, and our own internal processes that keep us, held back is so true. And I know I can speak personally, on those accounts, and was dead on. And so I'm hoping that this station direct will be able to kind of rectify those situations, and like you said, give us more a powerful stance inside to kind of stand from. And I sure hope so, because that's directly on my moon. So I'm like, come on, Pluto, give me something. But not that. No, that's what it's been up until now. But hopefully this last pass will bring something of, good. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said, Mel, though, where it's like, we don't even, when Pluto is retrograde, it is, everything's internalized. And so it is like the stuff is being worked out, whether we intend for it to be or not. And then I like what you said, how it's not even like we have to do anything in particular. It's like we've done that work. We've done that very courageous confrontation of the parts of ourselves that are a little bit prickly to look at. And so just by the nature of doing that, we become stronger. And so it's not like we need to necessarily do anything. It just is. And we just radiate this strength, this Plutonian kind of strength, which is really beautiful.
Because, it's so interesting, Shawna, because this week is really calling upon us to, break free of things and make changes in our lives. Especially with that Jupiter, Uranus opposition, and then Pluto stationing direct, and then Mars trining that to basically allow us the energy in order to make these changes. And so I think that there's just going to be a lot of upheaval. And I want to say in a somewhat positive way. Like, I feel like we're going to be making these changes, in a way that allows us this more freedom, allows us to break down all these things that haven't been working for us, and to, get a new system in place, Cause hey, Capricorn loves its systems, loves its organization, and what is this and what is that. And, so we're kind of rebuilding these things, within us, I think. So, as far as Mars and Pluto are concerned, it's so interesting, Shawna. Let me see what you think here. Okay. So we have Mars trining Pluto. And then the day before we have that Venus opposition to Neptune. So we have this kind of energy that is like, maybe wants us to retract, relax, be inspired. And then we have this energy that's like, let's do this. Let's go work out at the gym fully. Let's go take care of business. Like, so how do we marry these two together in a sense, to know, I don't want to say the right action to take, because the right action is always different for every person, We can't say what's right for anyone. But how do we tap into this?
Yeah. So I think that's the question of the week, essentially, is like, what do we do there? Because they are two very different energies, and, both, Mars trine Pluto and then Venus opposite Neptune, they're both rooted in a way with the personal planets in Virgo. And then Neptune and Pluto are both about restructuring the ego. They're about, essentially, like, they're about the ego or the personality, like, in some way, dying or dissolving or falling away. And I know all of that sounds really intense. But it's like, I think that this really depends on a person's temperament, what they're naturally inclined to do. Are they inclined to work with power struggles, or are they, which is Plutonian, or are they more inclined to work with Neptunian themes of, fantasy, intuition, fear, disillusionment, and that kind of thing. And so I think it's a very personal question. Like, where does a person typically hang out in their temperament, and what transits are they having? Maybe they're having both. I don't know. That's me.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah. So I think this is what I would say. This is my answer, and I'm curious what you think is, it's a moment by moment feeling into what the appropriate action is. And it may be that we don't necessarily need to do anything. We're just feeling the stuff as it comes up. But I think that awareness and allowing the feelings to come up is key. Like that's really what the secret is to navigating this.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it's like you said, it is going to be a play-by-play scenario. You know, you could feel one way for, you know, a couple hours and then, you know, a little bit later, you'll be like, oh, it's something else. And, that really ties into what you were saying about how does, you know, are you a Neptune person? Are you a Pluto person? Are you a Mars person? Are you a Venus person? You know, chances are, depending on where, you know, that sits for you, and like Shawna said, the transits that you're having, you know, because the natal chart is everything. It's essentially setting up the energy that you're going to feel, how you interact with all this mundane energy that we're talking about. So if you're a real Pluto person, like I am, chances are, you know, the fact that Pluto is stationing direct on my moon, I'm a Scorpio rising, so my chart's ruled by Mars. I'm gonna really tap into that Mars-Pluto energy, you know, versus the Venus-Neptune. I mean, that's gonna be there, but as far as my chart's concerned, there's so much more juice around this Mars and Pluto energy. So I think that's, a great advice, Shawna. You know, you look into your chart if you know, any of you out there can read a chart enough to be able to assess these things. That might give you a little insight as to which will be heavier for you this weekend. And if you don't know those things, that's actually what Shawna and I are here for. So you can always reach out, and get that information. So, you know, I think that I'm looking forward to Mars trining Pluto because I feel like with all the Neptune transits and this Mercury square Saturn, you know, we've been in this in-between zone for a while now. And I think this is kind of that end cap that's like, okay, now we can start doing something here. Now we can, you know, just use all that energy, and hopefully use it positively. And what I like to call, this is my Capricorn moon, my acronym. My acronym is GSD. And GSD means to get shit done. When it's time to, GSD, you know, when Mars trines Pluto, it's time to GSD. That's the way I look at it.
If that's not a Capricorn moon saying, I don't know.
Yeah. So you can coin me #GSD because that exists. And you know, to bring it back into play with our whole title and, you know, how this can actually be a power struggle, in a sense. The fact that it's a trine, I think that if we need to confront certain things and certain, people in our life, because keep in mind, we have this Jupiter opposition in Libra, to Uranus. So chances are other people are going to be involved in this, somehow, just in this whole week. Especially with that Neptune opposition as well. So chances are, you know, if we bring that power struggle element in, we might need to, have some type of conflict. But not in a bad way. I'm thinking of like conflict that helps things, that helps, you know, when you confront something that's not working anymore, whether it's a conflict with inside yourself or a conflict with another person or a shadow aspect, you know, because we're talking about all these oppositions. You know, how can we use this time to have that conflict, but to do so to where we are that much more empowered at the end of it and we've resolved, some, struggles and, power issues that we have in our lives.
Yeah, I like that, Mel, because that really, it ties in a lot of the aspects that we've talked about through the whole week, where it's like we need to engage with the process of what's happening, through that confrontation.
Yeah. So that just might need to happen, and don't be afraid of it. Sometimes, you know, that's just a part of life. And once again, like Shawna was saying, it kind of goes back to your makeup and your natal chart and just how you are comfortable with that. 'Cause ask Aries, are they comfortable with confrontation? Probably.
They're like, when am I not?
Yeah. So, and then you ask the Libra. Are they, you know, here we're talking about this. Are they good with confrontation?
Yeah.
Not always. But sometimes they're very good with it, you know, so it just depends on the person. But let's segue into these tarot cards so we can just, kind of add another element to it. And this is another interesting combination, I have to say. We have the devil who's back again, as the focus, and then the daughter or page of cups is the grounding. And I really look at this as, you know, free yourself in order to take action on your dreams. Because we have this devil in the bondage, and the devil represents Capricorn. That is the trump card for Capricorn. And Capricorn can get stuck in this old patterns and these old habits that are no longer working. And it's time to break free from those things so that you can make this fresh emotional start, and really realize those dreams that you're having. So Shawna, how do you look at these two cards, together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, at first when you sent me these cards, I was like, ugh, devil.
What's up with this devil?
The darn devil. But actually, just in this moment, I'm realizing how both of these cards show the polarity possibilities of Pluto energy, because the devil, totally Pluto all day. It's like, bondage and being restricted, being held back, the power dynamic, especially with the devil. It's like, it's not just about people that have power over you. It's that you are willingly giving your power over to this situation or these people, and maybe you don't even realize it. The other side of Pluto is that Pluto actually has a lot of creative, like super rich creative power. Pluto's, for this reason, it's also related to sexual energy. And with the Page of Cups, like, this is creative, it's spontaneous, and it's like this really rich emotional energy, which is a benefit of Pluto when we're working with the shadow energy and we're not assigning our authority to other people or situations. So to me, this is like, yeah, like, okay, where's the bondage? Where's the power? Where is it that we're giving ourselves away? And then how can we bring that back? How can we get back into that root, that sacral energy, and to, even like in a more practical way, like even owning our sexuality for ourselves versus giving it away indiscriminatorily.
Yeah, those are all great points. And they really are, like, you know, this kind of Pluto and devil energy can go all those directions. And, you know, I find it interesting that the fact that the Daughter of Cups, there's a couple different ways we can look at it from my point of view, as far as how that poor little Daughter of Cups, that sweet little daughter, got entangled with the devil. And, you know, one thing I would look out here for is looking out for immature emotions that cause us that fear and negativity and hold us back and keep us in those bondage. Because the daughter essentially hasn't developed that emotional realm, fully enough, in some respects. And so that could be an aspect here to where we have to, work on any type of, immature, not fully developed emotions that are keeping us in this, subservient place. I'd also look at, you know, because the daughter because she's so sensitive, doesn't like conflict. And here we have again, you know, the whole idea that if we're not confronting something and we're too sensitive to emotionally say something, you know, we're once again being left in bondage, right? Because you're fearing this conflict, and kind of speaking your mind and your emotions. There could be, where you're essentially held back, due to that. And then if we really want to tie in this kind of all these Neptune transits that we're having, and the fact that we have Venus opposition Neptune, during the weekend, same time we're having these transits, let's get back to like the page and the daughter and how it's really about your dreams and your idealistic vision. You know, that's why this girl is so sensitive, because she's so emotional. She's just developing these things, and she's very idealistic, and she's a dreamer. And you know, here we have that devil as a focus. So how can we break out of that bondage, to honor those dreams and that idealistic vision? And to free ourselves from like certain insecurities that might be holding us back. So those are kind of like the three major pinpoints I would look at, you know, are immature emotions holding you back? Is the inability to have conflict holding you back? Or are you not really embracing what your dreams and vision is saying and it wants to be developed, but you're holding yourself back? So those are the three things I would really focus on for these.
Yeah, I love those. Those are important, Mel. That emotional development feels really crucial for this Pluto transit.
Yeah, because Shawna, we were saying earlier in the episode, where's our first quarter moon? In Capricorn.
Yep.
So I have a feeling, even though we haven't made a title segment for the moon, for the first quarter, it has snuck its way into this whole episode. It really has. So just some questions to take away. I would ask myself, with all the changes that have been made internally since April, how can I implement that change on the outside? How can I transform my outer reality? I would ask, what power struggles are currently engaged in my life? How can I free myself from them? How can I not fall prey to immature reactions, yet embrace constructive conflict? And then lastly, I would ask, with this supercharge in the air, what is the best use of my energy? How can I use it to get grounded and make progress in the material realm? So take those away and do what you will with them. So Shawna, what have we learned? Oh my God. What have we learned? I don't even know at this point. Well, we've learned that Mercury is going to square Saturn and Venus is going to oppose Neptune. And it's really activating that, Saturn Neptune square that is still, loosely apparent in the sky. And we need to find some magical solutions. We've learned that Jupiter in Libra opposing Uranus in Aries is a big deal for not only us and the whole world. And it's calling for us and the world to make some quantum leaps. And then lastly, we learned that Mars, trine Pluto, which is stationing direct, is really kicking up some power struggles. And so how can we break free from that energy, and transform our lives? So Shawna, I know you have some excellent action items for everyone to take away. So please share.
I do. So this is a 3-parter. Action item number 1 is to try something new. So super simple. I'm going to leave that up to you, but I want you to push your comfort zone a little bit. This is to tap into the Jupiter Uranus energy. It's really great to get outside of your comfort zone to allow yourself to try something new. So that's really simple, really easy. Number 1. Number 2 and 3 are, I want you to make a list of things. This is to tap into the Mars-Pluto aspect. So first, I want you to make a list of situations where you feel any kind of guilt. And so this can be feeling guilty about a certain situation or something that you've done or not done, or it could just be that you feel guilty around, a relationship or something like that. This is open-ended intentionally. It can be a long list. It can be a short list, but, really muse on it and notice where you feel like I should have done this or I should have done that, any kind of guilty feelings. And then the second part of this is to make a list of resentments. And this one, again, depending on your temperament, it may feel a little bit more challenging. Either of these may be really hard. But where do you feel annoyed or resentful, or where someone was supposed to do something they didn't, or you were supposed to get something and you didn't, or you feel like you kind of got fleeced, anything like that. I want you to write those down. And I'm drawing these actually from, one of my favorite books at the moment. It's, by Donna Cunningham. It's called Healing Pluto Problems. And she has you do this as an exercise, and then to kind of compare and look back and forth at each one. Sometimes these situations are weirdly tied together, because this is what happens with Pluto when there's some kind of power struggle, and sometimes this can happen even with codependence, where it's like we feel guilty because we're being given to, or we're giving too much, and then resentment comes in. It becomes like this weird kind of cycle. So even if these are subtle things too, you know, like where one of your friends always pays or always, you know, treats or something like that, you know, little things like that. But these are important to work through whenever we have a Pluto transit, because they help us to get more clear on how it is that we actually feel versus how we want to feel. And when we're clear on how we actually feel at an unconscious level, then our actions can be more in alignment, and we can be more direct, and we can engage in healthy conflict, or stand up for ourselves, or do what is the right thing in a more direct way.
I like that. I'm looking at the book right now. I can see it from my bookshelf. I'm like, oh, I better, I better drag that out.
That book, girl, oh my gosh. Cause I am a Plutonian person. I have Pluto square my sun and my Mercury, and I'm having a Pluto transit. And I was like reading it, and I'm like, oh my God, this book was like written for me. It's so good.
Well, I'll have to pull it out, because I feel you. Pluto squares my sun and my moon. Exactly. Yes. 16 degrees. And it's conjunct my moon and opposing my sun and squaring my Pluto. Oh, there goes the sirens. I better get the book out. So all those themes I can totally relate to, Shawna. So those are excellent action items, and we all should get to work on those, and also pick up that Donna Cunningham book, because that could be a good read this week. So we have some action items. And so, Shawna, how else can people get involved in this podcast, in us?
Yeah. So another way to get involved, of course, is to become a patron of the podcast. So you can show your appreciation, but also so that you can get those really cool and helpful show notes with all of the dates and times of the transits and the quotes and the tarot cards that we used. You can find out more about that on our Facebook page or Instagram, the Feminine Principle Podcast, or feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com. And then, of course, we are doing that Facebook Live event on October 5th, Thursday, October 5th. So that will all be on our Facebook page, and we're really excited to connect with you guys and encourage you to let us know what questions you have as well, because you know we're here to chat it up and answer and to be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, because I've interacted with other Facebook Live segments with other people, and it's just always a good time. And it's just a fun way to get interactive with everybody. So we really hope that you come on down. Once again, that's October 5th. It's a Thursday, and it will be 9 a.m. Pacific time. Just a couple little things. So you know where to find us. You can find me at energeticprinciples.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at Energetic Principles. Shawna, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Neo Feminine Astrology.
And just as a reminder, we have a centralized presence now. So if you want to come follow us in our together zone, you can come to it's at Feminine Principle Podcast, not Prodcast, Podcast. And that's on Instagram and Facebook. So come on down and check that out. So any last words, Shawna, for our listeners?
Yeah, just sending lots of love and appreciation for how much you guys appreciate this podcast. We always love hearing from you and how you're doing. And then along those lines, if you do enjoy this podcast, definitely leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. That helps us to reach even more people and to get the word out. And you can make sure that you subscribe as well so that you get future episodes the very moment that they are uploaded.
Yes. And just as a reminder, they are uploaded at midnight Pacific time on Sundays. So keep a lookout. So everybody, I hope everybody has a fabulous week, and we would love to hear from you and what all these transits mean for you. So please reach out. But in the meantime, we thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.